We start with the One Planet Summit here in Paris. President Emmanuel Macron hosting dozens of world leaders, as well as businesses and campaign groups. The aim being to bolster the fight against climate change. This 2 years after the Paris climate deal, an agreement the US said it was leaving in June. Now, how to finance climate action is an even bigger issue. Joining me now on set, Henri Landès, the head of the Good Planet Foundation in Paris, executive director rather. Hello, thank you very much for coming in. So this focus on finance, is it because so far it's been the elephant in the room, and just how much do you think can be done on this issue in just a single day?
Yeah. Where we put the money, where the money comes from, how much should we put in to fight climate change has always been the elephant in the room, has always been the difficulty in negotiations on climate change. And so it is ambitious, and it is a good idea to have a summit that is dedicated to financing the fight against climate change and adapting to it. Now, what's also interesting is here we don't have a negotiation between nation states and their representatives. We have more of a summit that is supposed to galvanize finance towards climate. And that's giving companies a big room, a big space to put out their announcements and commitments. And so we're seeing a series of announcements and commitments by these companies and by different investment organizations. And we're seeing different solutions that are being highlighted a bit more, such as the divestment movement, meaning taking money out of fossil fuel projects. Green bonds being one of the solutions as well, putting money so that your savings contribute to fighting climate change. These solutions merit more attention, and so this summit is giving that. However, what we don't have in this negotiation is a lot of time. As you said, it's 1 day. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's too short for announcements, but it doesn't mean that we're going to follow the announcements very much or go into too much detail. And secondly, we're not negotiating on things that we need to do less of, including maybe searching for more fossil fuel reserves or signing trade agreements that maybe don't put climate objectives as a priority. So we have a very positive move forward on fighting climate change through this finance summit, but we also have to remember that some incompatible projects on climate change need to be stopped as well. So we have a very interesting dynamic that is coming through in this summit.
You mentioned companies and the announcements made. Are they encouraging announcements, and just how important is it that companies set an example? Yeah,
it is very important that companies set an example. Heads of state need to set an example as well, but companies are very often seen as, if they are making a very sincere commitment, part of the solution. So are local governments, and we have representatives of local governments as well. And the state of California is very much involved now in even representing the United States' action, as we've seen that the federal government is not going to do as much. Companies have a specific role because they have a lot of resources, depending on the company. A lot of philanthropists as well are getting involved. A lot of former politicians that decide to move out of the political world and then launch coalitions of public-private organizations so that they have more wiggle room to make commitments and implement concrete projects. It's the case for Al Gore, Michael Bloomberg. So we see this interesting dynamic where companies absolutely are part of the solution, and this summit is supposed to galvanize that. However, companies also need to make sure that they're following up on these commitments, following the projects that they finance, looking at their quality and how their implementation locally, and also moving away from their former model, which was very much based on fossil fuels for a lot of them.
Now, one of the people attending this summit is Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was the governor of California, and he has said, fret not, it's not because the US has withdrawn that individual states or companies, etc., can't make a difference. Macron, though, telling CBS that he believes Donald Trump will change his mind and not withdraw the US. What do you think about that?
I'm a bit skeptical about Donald Trump changing positions because he really made that announcement to speak to his base, his political base, that really doesn't believe that the United States should succumb to international agreements on anything, if even more so on climate change, which they also sometimes have a problem believing in. And I feel like when he made that announcement, it was much more of a political message than it was an actual decision to withdraw the United States from a concrete action plan of negotiation with the rest of the world. And I think that it may happen that in 3 years, which is officially when Donald Trump could submit this notification of withdrawal, that he may not do it, specifically because we're going to be around election time, and it may be not in his capacity to actually come through with it, because it'll then take another year once he submits that notification for the United States to be able to officially withdraw. So I think it was more of a political announcement. I do think and I know that he is going to weaken the United States' fight against climate change back home with lots of different tools, executive orders, etc. However, Arnold Schwarzenegger is right in the sense that many local governments, big companies, entrepreneurs, investment bankers, NGOs are increasing their fight against climate change since the Donald Trump announcement. And so his net impact on fighting climate change, on the United States' role in that, is difficult to understand today, because it may be that there must be such a pushback against what he decided to do that in the end we have even more stakeholders getting involved in the fight.
Now, you mentioned what Donald Trump is doing domestically. The same question applies to Emmanuel Macron, because the French president he's been carrying the climate change leadership baton, if you like, but it's not really something that he campaigned on. It wasn't at the forefront of his presidential campaign, but with the US taking a backseat, he's now really stepping in the limelight. Yeah,
he understood that fighting climate change was one of the biggest challenges for humanity of this century. He didn't put it maybe as far in front of the priorities as a lot of NGOs and a lot of citizen groups and some companies wished him to, and he wasn't seen as an environmentalist in terms of his convictions and his understanding of the complexities of the problem. He's a very smart president. He understands that it's a stake that he cannot ignore, and so he's trying to go full throttle on it. He also, yes, saw when Donald Trump announced that the United States was pulling away that there was an opportunity for France, as the president of COP21, where the Paris Agreement came out of, as a country that is very much a leader in the European Union. He saw an opportunity for France to take much more leadership position, and thus him represent also the fight of the European Union on climate change in international sphere. However, he is criticized, and for good reason, on a few decisions that he made nationally, such as his support for the trade agreement with Canada, such as his positions on sustainable agriculture and the exit from pesticides in France, such as his positions on nuclear energy, which is not necessarily bad in the immediate term for climate change, but it stalls the development of renewable energy, which is good for the fight against climate change. So Emmanuel Macron, there's a slight paradox in how he's positioning himself on climate change internationally with how he's positioning himself nationally. And so we're going to very much know in the next few years how coherent his position is. What is for certain is that this summit is a step in the right direction, but there needs to be a few other steps in other areas that are taken.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Henri Landès from the Good Planet Foundation here in Paris. Thank you.